All right, welcome everyone. It's 5:30. I do not have a report tonight because we've got some big things today that I'm looking forward to talking about later. But any housekeeping items or questions on our agenda?
Madam Chair, I know probably Commissioner Gold and Commissioner McKinney and I would commend Brooke for putting together a really good walk last Thursday on Linda Road. I thought it was very well put together and look forward to seeing them.
Thank you. Any other items?
Madam President?
Oh, Commissioner McKinney.
I do have a question on item number 7 on the consent agenda. It's just a quick question. I don't know if we want to deal with it now or deal with it once we get into the.
I would love to address it now, if that's all right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is the towing services change order was a more than 100% increase. I'm curious if we have any idea of why we have needed so much more towing services this year than in the past.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, good afternoon and great question. This year, based on where we were in chip seal operations, we did tow a lot more vehicles than we did expect. Now, one of the things, the benefits that we provide all the citizens here is that we do not charge our citizens for that towing operation. We kind of feel it, especially in the area we were in, we kind of feel that that would be an undue financial burden on a lot of folks. So we moved a lot more cars than we thought we were going to. That's the reason why.
Was there somehow a shortfall in publicity, notifying people, getting them advised that they need to move their cars, or was there anything we could have done or that we did differently that might have led to that?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, no. We went above and beyond again when it came down to not only public notifications via all all social media outlets, newspapers, TVs, door knockers, but sometimes people just don't pay attention.
So maybe the Southwest Boise neighborhood kind of disappointed us. Is that what we're saying?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, I would never, ever say that a neighborhood.
Come to the defense of my neighbor.
Yeah, I would never say.
Suggest there's a lot fewer people have garages and driveways, and than there are in some of the newer parts of the county. So that's probably why there are just a heck of a lot more vehicles, and some of them may have not have driven them for ages. And it's like, well, I don't even know where the key is. So. It was a denser, older neighborhood where we chip sealed this year, and there will be next year too.
But again, I'd like to just let the commission know that, and thank you. That's one of the privileges and benefits we provide on our chip seal operations when we have to move those vehicles. We do not charge them; we pay for it, and we let them know where it's at.
Okay, thank you.
Madam President, if I could, if you, in your motion, whoever does make those motions, if you could please on consent item number 5. If you remand that back to staff indefinitely, we're not ready to have you approve this yet, please.
Thank you, Director. Any other comments about the agenda today? All right, Director.
Madam President, Commissioners, again, good afternoon. Thank you. A little different today for the Director's report. What I'd like to do, Stacy, if you would bring that up, please. Yesterday, I shared, we had the all staff, and I shared a series called 23 Recap with the team. What I'd like to do today is share that with you, but in slightly a different format. I'm going to introduce the subject. I'll have a couple words about some of our awards, those sort of things, but I'm going to turn it over to our deputy directors to brief you on their specifics when it comes down to the accomplishments that all of their team members made during this year. So, next slide, please, Stacy. I know it's probably not the bragging rights is here across the board. As you can see, commissioners, your team has been recognized across the board on the tremendous jobs they have done this year in FY23. There is a tremendously diverse set of awards, accolades from projects to people, and of course, recognizing the tremendous give back that our team does to the community on multiple occasions across the board. So I wanted to share this with our team members, share it with you. And as I stated last week, you see we've aced all of our annual audits. Well, this Friday we start again, and it's going to be a 2-month fest with Ide Bailey as we walk through this again going forward. So that being said, next slide, Stacy. If I could have Chief of Staff and his group come up, and he'll walk you through administration, and we'll just go through our deputy directors in that order.
Good evening, Madam President, Commissioners. For the record, Paul Daigle, Chief of Staff. I'm going to hit IT, commuter ride, procurement, and budget, and then I'll allow legal and HR and accounting to speak for themselves. But just a quick recap. The 4 major departments in IT: records management, GIS system, web dev, and network ops. Records management refers to Laserfish, the backbone of our records management system. And our Laserfish team has become quite the experts in the Valley. They were asked to co-host the regional Laserfish conference here in Eagle last week. They were even asked to present on some panels, so they're getting a lot of recognition. GIS developed an inlet and storm drain mapping system that's going to greatly help us meet those NPDES requirements. And they also published that latest version of the bike map that's been well received. On the web dev side, they were instrumental in helping us with the new public-facing website. And then the one that is getting not much publicity, but is really a major deal for us, is the network ops. They are the ones that defend us. On a daily basis or on a monthly basis, we get attacked by all kinds of places. You name it, stands, China's a big player, all kinds of. This month alone, we've defended ourselves against 300 external attacks, which is pretty average. And they've also done a really good job at educating all of our folks on phishing things. And they send out these random emails that make it look like you're clicking on the right thing. Like today I got one that said, oh, by the way, it's time to change your password. It just didn't look right, so I hit the little fish thing and said, congratulations, you passed. So I don't know if y'all are getting them, but if you like, we can educate y'all too. Commuter ride, real proud of the commuter ride team. 88 of 97 vans en route, which is exactly about the amount. We're at 100% capacity, in all honesty, because we do keep a few vans in reserve. But just some interesting statistics: 623 riders, 125,000 van pool trips. 125,000. That's amazing. 3.6 million miles they've reduced on the roadway, and it's their total smart trips guide is up by 14% this year, so doing a very remarkable job. Procurement side, they set a record this year. Normally we average about 80 procurements a year, we're up to 105. Speaks volumes of how busy we're getting. And we also went from a paper system to a computerized system, free to the general public, that everybody is using now. So it's really streamlining that whole procurement process. And the budgeting side, Christine speaks for itself. I mean, she does such a great job, and she just continued this year to do a little bit more with that OpenGov software, so that once it becomes mandatory that we open up the budgeting process so the general public can see, it'll be transparent to the user. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry so she can brag about HR, unless there are any questions. No?
Lots of great work, Paul.
Thank you.
Hi, Madam President, Commissioners, Sherry Canals, Deputy Director of Human Resources. I just have a few things I just kind of wanted to highlight for you. One of the things from FY23, and we're not quite done yet, we still have this week to record, but we have filled 155 positions this year. That's yet another record setting for us. Just a point of clarification, that does not mean we had 155 people leave the district. Roughly 43% of those positions were internal fills. So that means when we had a vacancy from someone leaving, it actually may have meant we filled 2 or 3 other positions as we promoted people from within. So again, about 43% were filled internally. A few other items, we hosted the Take Your Child to Work Day. This was the first time we've had this since COVID, and we had over 100 kiddos here at the district, and it was a super fun event and a great opportunity for our parents to be able to bring their kids and just see what mom and dad does. We also partnered with IT to automate our training request. And this is more of an in-house form, but with all of the training that we do here at the district, it was very paper intensive, and being able to automate that process has really sped up the process and made it much easier from a user perspective. And something new this past year, we hosted what we referred to as the Bargo Treat Dog Costume Contest. It was a hit. We also hosted a dog walk that was in conjunction with our wellness program. But we also promoted or took it as an opportunity to look for donations for the Idaho Humane Society. That was a very popular event and a really a fun way to not only help out the community, but to give an opportunity for our employees to interact with one another. So unless you have any other questions, I'll stop at that and turn it over to Steve.
Thanks, Sherry.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to say something. I'm sorry. Our Deputy Director of Communications is not here today, but I want to let you all know the amazing job our team has done across the board, starting with ACHD rebranding, which was a major, major undertaking for any organization, but especially one our size. And if you look at the slide there, the number of things that they have done has just set records across the board. We are very, very thankful that we have such an amazing group of professionals running our communications team. So with that, I'll turn it over to the lawyer.
Good evening, Madam President, Commissioners.
Yeah.
We had an exciting year, the legal department.
Steve, are you going to show us a slide about how exciting it was?
I don't know, I think this is it, isn't it? We did not develop the inlet and storm drain work order system, I will tell you that. But what we did do, and I think you're familiar with it, is we did, out of our office, the ADA ProWAG implementation project. And part of that has been working with staff to help implement the ADA and ProWAG throughout our policy. The other thing we did that's not up there is we've done a cost analysis of, first started with our fiber optic fees. Under Idaho law, we're not allowed to charge any more than our actual costs. And we have been fairly conservative, I'll say really conservative over the past on the fees that we charge across the district. And we thought it would be a good time to, because of that law and some other challenges in other jurisdictions within the state, we felt that we ought to have a cost study done so that our fees would be defensible. And we expanded the study, which we call phase one, which this was the fiber optic agreement. And I get into the reason why we did it like that because of some FCC regulations. But then we have expanded that to phase two, which is looking at all of our development services fees for development and making sure that the fees that we are charging, one, they aren't beyond what our actual costs are, and two, that we're adequately getting compensated for the costs associated with the fee structure. So those are two things, really the only thing. Proud to say that for the bulk of the year, we didn't have any pending eminent domain cases, which is fantastic. First time in 21 years. But lately you have increased that to about 13 right now. We've settled several of those. And I think that's it. Any questions?
You left out, your expertise on the policy and the ordinances too, of course, Steve, but,
Well,
or is that not worth highlighting? Maybe all the kudos just go to Ryan.
wait a minute.
Ah!
And Madam President, I do have an apology. I understand we have a standing sit-in as an acting Deputy Director for Communications, and she's prepared some comments.
Madam President, Commissioners, I'm Rachel Bjornstead, the Public Information Officer.
Rachel, thank you.
As the Director said, Shandy is out. She's joining us online this evening, but we are so excited to report on the variety of metrics for the Communications Department. As you all can recall, we launched the new Engagement HQ public involvement that hosts all of our projects, their corresponding information, all the surveys. We have 33 of those, and we welcomed nearly 5,000 responses since launching. We've also had nearly 63,000 visits to the various projects on EHQ. And we were also able to launch our first commenting map. That was with our integrated 5-year work plan. And with this new tool, we had over 1,200 comments, which was a big win for us. The public also engaged with us through Tell Us. In fact, we dispatched and various departments responded to 4,682 Tell Us messages, 96% of which were resolved within 1 week. When they weren't writing to us on Tell Us, they were messaging us on social media or commenting on one of our over 600 posts throughout the year. We were happy to welcome almost 1,000 new Facebook followers and 263 new guests on Instagram. In addition to EHQ, we also launched GovDelivery. That's our new email campaign platform. We've been very pleased with GovDelivery's ability to segment our information so that there are a lot of topic options for our residents. They've always been able to subscribe to a specific project, but now with GovDelivery, they are able to subscribe to all projects within certain cities or unincorporated Ada County. They can also specify if they want job opportunities or specific project types. In FY23, we sent 175 bulletins totaling almost 170,000 emails to nearly 11,000 subscribers. Over the year, we sent almost 70 press releases, more than 20 traffic advisories, keeping media outlets apprised on all things ACHD along with the public. These releases, combined with the strong relationships that we've built with our local reporters, greatly benefited ACHD in the community. ACHD was in the news at least 100 times during this past fiscal year. Since we began tracking in January, we've had about 50 direct interactions with media, whether that's providing a statement or giving an interview. And we've also hosted a media mixer where we got to meet with reporters and give them a chance to see how we operate, which also led to more coverage for us as well and strengthened our relationships with the media. That was one of many events that our team was a part of over this last year. We also hosted our communications counterparts with the cities and our partner agencies at 2 communications connection meetings, which led to collaboration on 2 campaigns. It greatly increased the open dialogue between our teams as well. We had representation at 15 business meetings, 10 community organization meetings, and 34 HOA neighborhood association meetings. For the first time, at the request of President Pickering, we also held our first Neighborhoods in the Know meeting, where we met with HOAs and neighborhood associations and got to know them and had some of their specific questions answered. Throughout the year, we were also thrilled to coordinate with our maintenance and DTS teams to get our people and our equipment out to 14 touch-a-trucks and parades. We also enjoyed celebrating everyone's hard work at 3 ribbon cuttings and our groundbreaking. And of course, last but not least, we can't forget our very successful, we feel, new brand that we rolled out this year. So all in all, it was a great year of connecting you to more.
Well done.
And that's it for me. I'll turn it over to Sherwin.
Thank you, Rachel.
Madam President, Commissioners. So as the Director stated, most important accomplishment for the accounting and finance team is the acing the audits. As you know, we have 2 audits each year, the year-end financial statement audit and also the Idaho Transportation Department indirect cost allocation plan audit. Now, the results of the audit is basically a culmination of every department's performance throughout the year. So because of the great outcome of the audit, I would like to thank basically every department and every employee in the district for helping us get these great results. Okay, and then as the director stated, the auditors will be here this Friday doing an inventory count, and then next week they'll be here to do the single audit, which is a review of our federal aid contracts. Any questions?
Thanks, Sherwin.
You're welcome.
Evening, Commissioners. For the record, Lloyd Carnegie, Maintenance Manager. So yes, this year has definitely been a challenging year for maintenance. We have done some amazing accomplishments amongst all the challenges that we have faced. As you're aware, we are responsible for maintaining over 5,300 lane miles of roadway, and it continues to grow every year. In that, we did over 2,800 potholes filled within 24 hours. That's a very impressive amount that our maintenance team has been able to complete and make sure that our roads are safe for the traveling public. We've swept over 36,000 lane miles. Just last week, we celebrated the completion of our chip seal season, in which we did over 286 lane miles with our combined crew. Again, great accomplishments from our maintenance folks and ability to maintain all the roads and sidewalks within our right-of-way with the challenging year of vacancies and limited temporary staff to help us out. And so they really came to the pump and really helped make sure that this was a successful year. Our fleet department was also very successful in maintaining our 422 drivable assets, keeping them in a 99% in-service rate, which is an impressive rate when you look industry-wide of units being in service, ready for our crews to use whenever we need them. And so they have done a very impressive year.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Thank you.
Commissioners, for the record, Ryan Head, Deputy Director of Development and Technical Services. So it's been a good year from a development perspective, and probably more of a regular year from a development perspective. While our development applications and construction plan submittals were down about 300 in each of those categories, that allowed the team to actually catch its breath and to bring down our review times to more reasonable times for the development community. And I want to highlight, you know, when we talk about their 882 submittals, that would be the number of submittals received. That's not the number of reviews done. In some cases, we have up to 4 or 5 reviews on each of those. And so the team has worked very hard to process those in as quick order as possible to get out to the public and to the community the resources that the development community provides. On the impact fee side, as you can see, we had a little bit of a slower first few months of the year, but things picked up and followed pace for the last number of years. And so we are happy to say we have hit the revised target for impact fees and are just over 21 million actually as of this week, 21 million impact fees collected. So that's one thing that's different from previous years is that a good portion of those were commercial. Historically, we've been closer to about 25% in the commercial area for impact fees. And so that you can see where that the area of development that slowed down a bit more is residential. From a permits and traffic control perspective, we've issued 3,200 permits, but what you can definitely tell again in that is that's not a single visit to a site, that's many visits to a site. And that's a lot of projects happening at any given time that the team goes out to and reviews and reviews and reviews and checks traffic control and then reviews again. On an operations perspective, our signal in service rate stays at 99%, which is incredible. That those few times or when the signal goes into flash. But ultimately, of the 458 signals that we have in operation, they've been in service 99% of the time. Our bridges, again, also stay at a 99% rating of being in good or better condition. We have a number of school zone beacons and pedestrian signal beacons. We have a number more projects that are in the works to continue to expand on those numbers. Our TMC operated and reported 2,800 incidents throughout the year. It's a lot of crashes. And while we don't love to see that, we're grateful to have a TMC that is working so effectively to get the word out to the public and to make sure that people know what's going on in those areas. We installed 3,500 signs throughout the year, and you can see there the markings and miles striped from this last year. Now, I will say those miles completed are not as many as we'd like to have completed, right? We have, as you saw, some 5,000 lane miles out there, and so we'd like to definitely get that a little bit further in upcoming years. One of the most exciting things out of this last year is the creation of a rapid implementation team, and to see, as was reported just last week, the number of projects that have been completed. The team has embraced this. They've taken on this new really approach and identity, and they are working very well to complete projects as quickly as possible. Now, in the not so great news, when we look at how well our system is operating from a safe systems perspective, we've had far more and way too many fatalities this year. And now, in looking at that, the majority of those have been vehicle drivers who have been killed, but there's also been, again, too many pedestrians and even one cyclist who was killed this last year. But the good news that we do have is that we're trying to respond. The rapid projects is the team responding. The leading pedestrian interval is the team responding, and ultimately we're doing what we can to try and affect and curb that number so that doesn't continue to happen. And we're grateful for the commission's support in achieving, getting those things to happen this year.
Thank you, Ryan.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm here representing the Planning and Projects team. I just have to put in a word for the team. They're the ones that really do the day-to-day work. I'm often just a figurehead of so many people working so hard to get these projects planned for, designed, the right-of-way acquired, and then ready to bid through the public bidding process, which there's a lot that goes into that, and it takes quite a bit of time and effort. And we love our work, and hopefully it shows in the projects that we're able to prepare every year. I do want to highlight a few things. This year, ACHD successfully stood up its Federal Aid Project Management Group. What a perfect time to do that with the RAISE grant coming in and all of those projects, $5 million or $6 million really in design of those pedestrian and bicycle projects through the RAISE grant. Those are going to be worked on for many years going forward. We've also, we are adding construction right at the beginning of the fiscal year. We made the decision now, and we're moving forward with that. So it'll be a cradle to grave under the single division. All of the planning, design, right-of-way acquisition, and then construction, which includes inspection, the lab, and everything that we do on the construction front under a single division, which I think is going to, it's a wonderful team that we've added to my team, and it's only going to increase collaboration through the whole process. As we shared with you earlier, we were able to revamp the project team structure. We had various outreach to internally, externally, to consultants, and we're really focused on ensuring that the projects that we are designing align with the Commission's direction. That is the whole point of that effort. We've we've had a lot of projects get ready for construction. Your construction budget this year is about $38 million. Those projects are either complete or near completion. Glad to report that Locust Grove, north of Victory, is open and operational, along with the roundabout as of last Friday. You're very aware of the Kootenai project, Roosevelt projects along the 10-mile corridor that we've been working on. The right-of-way team has been just absolutely doing a wonderful job this year. We've cleared 344 parcels, and by the end of this year, we're going to clear we're going to get close to 400. That's basically closing a parcel every day, if you want to look at it like that, which is just an amazing effort from that team. And remember, each of these parcels is an individual negotiation with a property owner within Ada County. It's very individual, and every property owner is treated with respect, and we have to work through the various issues that come up with right-of-way. We also, as you can see, they cut me off there. Oh, I'm over time. We've done a lot more, and we're proud of all the utility location that we do, the plans that we've adopted, and then obviously the asset management work that we do. So proud of that, and you'll be getting a more detailed report on our network level assessment later this year. So once again, thank you for this opportunity, and just glad to represent the team on this.
Great work, Justin. Director, did you have any closing thoughts?
Madam President, Commissioners, number one, thank you. Thank you. Secondly, in front of you, I shared this with the team. These are the 10 operational imperatives that will align with our focus on accelerating innovation and will align with all of the great things that the teams are doing. These are living documents, and I'd just like to point your attention to the very last page, which was operational imperative number 10. I think that says it all. And with that, Madam President, I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Thanks, Director. Commissioners, any questions? Thank you, staff, for leading tremendous teams and doing this amazing work. Amazing updates. All right, it's now 6:02. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome folks online and in person. Please join us for standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of the United States, one nation, with liberty and justice. Thank you. All right. First order of business is to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second. So moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. The next order of business is to adopt the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered routine and are action items unless otherwise noted. The consent agenda is enacted by one motion. There is no separate discussion on items on the consent agenda. If a commissioner or citizen would like, they may request any item be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. If we don't have any of those requests, I will stand for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney.
I move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented, with the exception of item number 5, which is to be remanded back to staff.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner McKinney. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, moving right along to our regular agenda, our action items. Our first order of business is Ordinance 252, our pathway policy. This is a public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Mr. Ryan Head.
Madam President, Commission, for the record, Ryan Head, Deputy Director of Development and Technical Services. I am excited to be here tonight to present to you Ordinance 252, which is the creation of a pathway policy within ACHD's development policy. So now just Just as a reminder, this is a public hearing and a decision briefing, and as an ordinance, it will require for commissioners to vote in favor for it to pass. First, wanted to present to you just a pictorial view of what we're trying to accomplish today. As a reminder, again, this is for development, and as new development comes in, we want to be able to require the right facilities that we want to see on the roadways. This would include things like a multi-use path, a wider buffer, where we can have trees and other things separating that pathway from the roadway. A vertical elements in that, like street trees. We would like to see narrower street sections in alignment with this, where the road will be narrower and have an impact on the speeds in those roadways. Additionally, this policy proposes specific design speeds that we believe are more appropriate for the roadways and modifies our existing policy to align with that vision. As this policy has been developed, we've met with the commission over a number of occasions. Starting back in May when we met to talk about what would be the vision of this policy. And we've met and reviewed different iterations of that. One of the most important things here is that we took this out to the public. We met with the stakeholders and with a number of different committees and different groups to make sure that we are understanding and developing a policy that works for everybody. In meeting with our advisory committees, the ADA, BAC, and PAG, they expressed support for this and provided a comment letter that was in your packet. We met with the development community and found support for this. We've met with our partner agencies, and you received at least a letter from one of those partner agencies with support and some modifications there. We also had the opportunity to present this to the public via a public forum and survey process. Through that process, we were able to have hundreds of visitors, but just 26 chose to take the survey. But of those 26, 88.4% agreed with the proposal. There was a minority that did express some concern with mixing bicycle and pedestrian traffic, and that was discussed with the commission most recently on the 26th when we talked over the comments that were made. Of the comments that are up here, we did review again on the 26th with the commission the feedback we got. We've made some modifications to the draft based on feedback from the Bicycle Advisory Committee, the City of Boise. We've received public letters of support and also some letters of concern. And so I wanted to go over a few comments that have come in since we met on the 26th and talk about and address these specifically with the commission here today. Sure. One of the questions that came in was how will pathways be handled at driveways? Would they go up and down? Would they be at the pathway level? With an 8-foot buffer, you can expect that you can keep them at the pathway level. There may be but we'll have to look at those on a site-specific situation. And commercial driveways, those are a little bit different than maybe other types of driveways. And so we'll have to look at each situation specifically, but ideally we'd like to keep the pathway at that level. There was a question that came in regarding pathways on bridges. Our expectation is if there's a pathway leading up to the bridge, the pathway would cross the bridge at the same width that it would be leading up to the bridge. We wouldn't expect to keep the full buffer there, but we would still expect to have some level of vertical element there to protect the pathway and those going counter to the closest vehicle lane and make sure that that's protected there.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yes, Ryan, being familiar with the communications we've had about pathways on bridges, what is our hope or intent or to have happen with, say, overpasses on the interstate? Those kind of bridges.
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner, first and foremost, I would say that's a very good question for our development or for our planning and projects department. who are the ones who develop those projects. As we're talking about it in this case, we're talking about development policy.
Right.
And where we would have those. But our intent would be to have the pathways can be consistent and cross the road at the same width that they lead up to a bridge. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I apologize for asking the wrong person that question.
Not a problem.
And if you don't mind me, Commissioner, Ryan, I think if you could just explain a little bit about what you mean by this is a development policy.
Yeah.
Because I think folks online, right, might not know what that means, and the differentiating that versus maybe what Justin's camp does.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President, Commission. Our development policy, section 7200, defines the conditions and the requirements that we place on developers when they develop in Ada County. This does not necessarily apply to the projects ACHD does. ACHD develops projects using the best methodologies and the best practices that are out there, and utilizing all commission directives outside of that have been given. And so they're very effective at looking at the conditions, building according to the conditions, but it's not necessarily guided by this policy.
So like a simpler way to put it even further could be development, and forgive me if I'm misspeaking, but development, again, this is new development, this is an expansion, right? So it's where we currently don't have those facilities, versus if this is a pathway that we're thinking about that Justin and his team would take on, that would be something where maybe that type of treatment or some type of treatment already exists. It's more infill, or it would need a little extra. It would definitely be we would need to look at it one by one, because it's very context sensitive, which of course we would do with any project, but it would have a lot of other factors besides just, oh, it's a road that we're widening, there's some buffer space within the right of way with the new development, that type of thing.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Yes, good job.
I didn't need that, but thank you. I don't know, I probably could have done it better.
You always tell us, so I thought I'd hear that back.
Oh, thanks.
The next question that came in was a request with regards to standardizing speed limits. As mentioned in this policy, we address design speeds, primarily when you're talking about developing a new collector, which are built by other people, not necessarily ACHD. We wanted to have standards for how they build and design those. As far as standardizing speed limits across the county, that's a little bit outside the realm of this policy, and is probably open for another conversation in partnership with the city jurisdictions and enforcement agencies. Next was a question regarding how does the policy address constrained or infilled corridors. Really, when you're talking about locations where the road is already built to its maximum condition or its ultimate condition, what do we do with those? In a number of these cases, what the policy envisions is that if there's an existing bike lane, that at a minimum, we are requiring that developer to add a buffer. That we're expanding that. If they're not able to install a pathway, that at minimum, they're enhancing the bike facility that's there with either a buffer or some other level 3 type facility as adopted in the bike master plan. And so while because development comes in parcel by parcel, we're not necessarily able to convert an entire road and change the facility all at once. But we are trying to improve the facilities with every opportunity that we can.
Madam President.
Commissioner Hanson.
And that's a big question for me, because obviously the areas I represent most familiar with, the arterials are already built out. Overland Road. And we're starting to see on Overland Road some significant redevelopment, and we'll probably see more and more and more. So right now it's an inadequate sidewalk and an inadequate bike lane, neither of which are really safe. So people cycle and walk on the sidewalk, which is, there's no buffer, it's attached. So when a developer comes in, okay, I'm gonna take out this, old use, abandoned use, now I'm gonna build an apartment complex or whatever, I'm a new use, and I've got half a block of frontage. What would we expect from them? Because the block on one side and the other are really inadequate would we be asking them, okay, we want you to help envision what that would look like? So put in the buffer, some sort of physical buffer, widen the sidewalk, put in the multi-use path or something so that it demonstrates what we'd like to do with the rest. Because is that how it would look? So even though people would be cycling along the bike, an inadequate bike lane or walking on the sidewalk, they then have a nice, safer facility for the frontage of the new development, and then they'd go back to, is that how it would look? Or would we say, give us some money, and we'll put it into a reserve, and when we get a couple miles worth ready to do, we'll do it all. Although that may take forever because people may not want to develop their adjacent property. So how is that going to look on Overland or places like that?
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, first of all, this doesn't envision taking money and setting it aside and then building up a fund to eventually do that. What this does is it would require of them to make improvements to the frontage of their property, including if there is an existing facility there, we'd want to have them enhance that existing facility as far as a bike facility. If there is a path or a sidewalk, it may require them to detach an attached sidewalk, and may require them to make it detached. We want to be able to still tie in on both sides to the existing facilities. And so we're not real, from a staff perspective, and what we see through this policy is we're not necessarily trying to create random islands of facility. As you saw in one of the letters that you talked about, the concern about the safety aspect of having random islands there. But we will, when there's opportunity to change the face of a block or a larger piece of land, we will definitely do that and take advantage of that. But if it is tying into a bike lane, we would have them still, even for small pieces, buffer that, so they're at least getting a little bit more protection for that smaller section.
So would you envision us, say Overland is a great example, we're scoping other streets, just saying we're going to scope Overland. This is what we would ideally like to see Overland look like as it gets redeveloped. And then say this is the ideal situation, and then it would function, like we're requiring it to function on the new arterials being built to the west. Or would we sort of, because we don't really have a vision to share with them other than, we need to protect these facilities, at least on your property. So I guess it's like,
yeah.
And the other is, of course, we've done this a lot where there's no sidewalks on a little local street. And so we don't require them to build a sidewalk just for one place, because it's not likely the other properties are going to develop. So that's the other, is that do they have a case to say, why are you making me do this when we have no idea when the adjacent properties are going to redevelop?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, just as it sits today, they will still have a case to make, and to your last point, to say that we're not tying into anything here. Why would we be building that? That case can still be made. As it relates to the vision, the policy lays out what the vision will be for arterial roadways. It talks about whether it will either be a pathway or it will be an enhanced level 3 bike facility with a detached sidewalk. That is the vision that is laid out in policy. It does account for situations in which we're tying into attached sidewalk and it's a small piece of property, so there may be some situations where we'll have a wider attached sidewalk. But ultimately, that's the vision laid out in policies, that we will have these enhanced facilities, and we will require that if this policy is adopted, we will require that of every developer when they're building.
Okay.
The last piece here was a question regarding enhanced crossing at roundabouts. This came in related to one of the exhibits that was developed prior to the full adoption into policy of PROAG. But ultimately, that policy says that we will build crossings in accordance with ADA guidelines. And so if PROAG requires that we enhance those crossings, we will enhance the crossings at roundabouts. And so we believe that the policy as it's written is appropriate and covers that case. So with that, Commission, this ordinance is before you. We are, as staff, recommending adoption to update policy 7200 to include a pathway policy and make associated adjustments. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thanks, Ryan. Just one more quick question. You covered this in a couple work sessions ago, but I just want just for the folks that are tuning in, just so they understand, again, this policy doesn't exist today. And so what does that mean when development is going in? And like some land use agencies, right, are requiring this or some aren't. Can you just describe kind of the layout and the ecosystem right now as it stands without this policy in place?
Absolutely. Madam President, Commission, right now ACHD cannot require pathways be built. We can recommend it, we can ask, we can beg and plead for other agencies to do that, but we cannot require that a pathway be built, even if we believe it is the best facility. But ultimately we would have to rely on land use jurisdictions to do that. If ACHD can require it, we have agreements with the cities that they will implement our requirements. And so with this, the change is that we will be able to require pathways. And under the agreements we have with the cities, that they would then implement those requirements. Case in point, we recently had a situation where the commission made a recommendation to a jurisdiction to implement a pathway along a property. That city was under no obligation to do that. Originally they required it, and then they changed their minds. And so we see with this, there's a change that we would now be able to require it, and they would be under obligation to enforce that.
Madam President?
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yes, sir. Ryan, concerning that very situation, have those plats all been signed, or can we still possibly resurrect some safety on that development?
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, we believe that one is past the point where we can enforce that.
That's a shame. Thank you.
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney.
Ryan, let me ask this. Let's suppose, I was kind of thinking this week with respect to our pathway policy about the proposed extension of Lake Hazel Road south of the airport over to the interstate. And of course, the intention there is that all of that land south of the airport will eventually be developed for industrial use. And industrial areas have notoriously low volumes of pedestrians and bicyclists for obvious reasons. So it strikes me, and this is something, of course, we'll have to discuss down the road, but it strikes me as is entirely possible that when that does get developed, initially it would be built as more like a rural roadway section, that we won't be putting curb gutter and sidewalk and so on, because it's just all industrial land, it's undeveloped at this point. Now, in a situation like that, so we've got what is essentially a rural section going through land that we know over time is going to be developed, but it will be developed in an industrial fashion. Does this new policy that we're putting in place here, is that going to obligate developers to put in pathways, comparable to an urban environment in a place where, it's low density industrial development? Is this policy flexible enough that it's going to allow rational decisions in a case like that, or do we kind of almost have a one size fits all policy here?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, the policy is flexible. The policy sets forth that it will be at staff's discretion which facility is required, whether it be a sidewalk or a pathway. It gives that ability to, the ultimate goal is to implement pathways, right? That is the goal as an area develops, that we want to have facilities that serve all users. Even in industrial areas, there are people who ride their bike to work or walk to work. They're in some of those situations, especially where you have new development happening out in the area of Lake Hazel. That said, it also gives us the ability to implement rural sections as needed, as in areas which we currently have locations. For instance, the existing Lake Hazel extension that occurred was built in a 2-lane rural cross-section. As the development occurs, a pathway or a sidewalk or a path, ultimately a sidewalk was built along it, because that is paid for by the development and is an exaction that's made of the development to build the frontage improvements. So it does provide the flexibility to look at situations differently, to look at them and gives us the added tool of a pathway, but doesn't take away from our existing tools that we have to limit the road section in areas where it's not quite ripe for that.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan. Any other questions for staff?
Madam President?
Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, I just had 2 questions about the word warrants, because that was raised. Is it because we use that as a term of art with respect to whether and when we're ready to put in a signalized intersection? We don't use that for a lot of other things, but in the way in which it seems to be used here, we're using it as it's justified or it's needed, and so we actually used a term that has a different meaning in a different context. Is a way we can address that, the risk that we misapply that, oh, we're waiting for warrants when warrants aren't an issue. The other is the notion of shy distance when you're on a bridge and there's vertical elements protecting you. We do always provide shy distance to drivers, but we don't count that when we do it for pedestrians and bicycles. Yeah, I noticed that ITD didn't do that on the bike lanes on Broadway Bridge, and therefore people cycle on the sidewalks, because the shy distance for the cars is the bike lane, and so therefore the cyclists don't feel safe. They have no place to go, and so they cycle on the sidewalks. So how do we deal with those 2 concepts?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, for lack of a better word, where it says as warranted, we believe PROAG creates the warrant as it relates to roundabouts. So the answer is there. PROAG creates the warrant, and so therefore we will be installing the facilities or the enhanced treatments at crossings of roundabouts. Staff has already begun to go back and work on retrofitting existing roundabouts to make sure that we are meeting that condition. So PROAG provides the warrant. As it relates to shy distance, ultimately we will make sure that we are providing adequate space. I can't necessarily speak to, the reference continues. When we're talking about development, we're typically talking about very minor bridges. And within a development, maybe a wide culvert in some situations. And so we will make sure that there's adequate space there. I can't necessarily, I don't have it all drawn out in my head. We don't have the design plans in front of us to do that, but we'll make sure that there is appropriate shy distance.
Great, I appreciate that. I think also big old power poles that are already built in the right of way there, so the pathway has to go around those. It'd be great to have footnotes to define what the staff interprets these to mean, which I know we can do without having to do additional language changes, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, Madam President, sorry, Commissioner Hanson, and that language regarding going around power poles and other things is in the draft policy.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions for staff at this time? Thank you, Ryan. All right, Miss Stacy, is there anyone in person?
Yes, Tessa Krieger.
Thank you. Welcome, Tessa.
Welcome back.
Are you staying? Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Madam President, Commissioners, my name is Tessa Grieger. I reside at 3638 South Vintage Way in Boise, Idaho. So it's nice to see you all again. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to provide comments. So I am representing the City of Boise Mobility and Public Spaces Manager in the Planning Division. And pleased to be here to be able to speak in support of the proposed pathway policy. First, I want to take this opportunity to commend the Commission and the ACHD team for all the work and the leadership that has culminated in these proposed policy updates. We believe the proposed requirements are a major transportation system for all users. And we further appreciate that these proposed requirements allow for greater alignment with the city's modern zoning code as it relates to pathway and streetscape standards. So in addition to the requirements for detached multi-use pathways along arterials and collectors, and a commitment to providing the highest level of comfort possible for people walking and biking, we appreciate the policy and language updates related to alignment with ACHD's Livable Streets performance measures, bike plan, and other design best practices, recommended inclusion of street trees and other vertical elements within the buffer zone, reductions of the target design speed and narrower street sections, incorporation of PROWAG considerations and compliance, design guidelines within the policy, including guidance for raised and protected crossings, protected bike lanes, as well as multi-use pathways. And then ultimately allowing discretion to the staff to determine the appropriate bicycle facility type in situations where a multi-use pathway may not be appropriate for that context, or where a different level 3 type bicycle facility may be warranted. We've greatly appreciated the opportunity to be involved in this process and certainly look forward to working together as we move forward to ensure that these policies are implemented and in our collective efforts to advance safety in our community. And then, if I may, I know this is probably not the appropriate time, but I did just also want to express our support for the next item on your agenda, and I can pause there if it's not appropriate right now, but okay.
That'd be great.
Okay, so just wanted to express support as it relates to adoption of the Integrated 5-Year Work Program. We appreciate the tremendous amount of work that goes into developing this work plan every year and the process of balancing priorities across the county, the improved public process that occurred this year, and certainly look forward to the implementation of the projects that are recommended in the coming years. And with that, I just want to thank you all so much for your consideration of these items tonight, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tessa. Thank you for taking the time to participate and weighing in.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Anybody else in the audience before I call people online for this item? Okay. The first person online is Ellen Campfield Nelson.
Welcome, Ellen. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thanks. My name is Ellen Campfield Nelson, and I live at 323 West Rescue Street in Boise. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. My pronouns are she, her, and I also just wanted to mention that I'm a certified planner who takes a lot of interest in exactly the kind of work that you're doing at ACHD and at the commission, and also a parent who cares a lot about safe roads, especially in neighborhoods. So I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to testify, and also fully endorse and support the work that's being done here, and encourage you to adopt this. It will be, I think, very, very helpful to communities. I just wanted to make a few little points. For starters, I think it's really important and bold and good that the commission and ACHD is tackling this. There's a lot of jurisdictions in the county. What you are helping do is standardize and bring along like a pedestrian, bike, vehicle experience in these development areas. And I just think it's like the best kind of work that an organization like ACHD can do. So thank you for taking that on. I want to, I guess, apologize that I may have missed some details in my review of the Pathways Plan, and so apologies if I'm misunderstanding any of the policies that are in there. So a couple things I wanted to just note for consideration as this hopefully is adopted and implemented. One is that I think as time goes on, it will be interesting to consider porous surfaces as options and not necessarily paving so much of the ground around streets to help with filtration and groundwater surface runoff and groundwater recharge. I'm not a water engineer, so I can't really speak to it more than that. I just know that's a current issue in a lot of cities in the West and towns. Similarly, all of the detached pathways and buffers and the width of the pathways is really commendable for safety, and I do endorse it. Um, every time we add a foot, though, we potentially add more kind of urbanization and we sort of push development to be bigger. And so I just think as we move forward, it's good to look at how much are we contributing to just the use of more ground as we add in these facilities. And then finally, I know there is some language around medians, but these pathways will be very helpful for pedestrians and bikes going along the roadway. But in those moments where people are crossing, that is the higher propensity for crashes. And so I think it will be important to watch and see if this, if these pathways, if the pathways plan is helpful in sort of preventing that kind of crash from happening. And then finally, one of the commissioners also mentioned interfacing with other jurisdictions. So I know we're talking about, you know, new development land, but I think there's always a struggle when you have interagency jurisdictions connecting up these systems in a way that protects the people that you're aiming to protect through this plan. So thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm excited to see this coming forward.
Thanks, Ellen.
Next on our list is Nina.
Welcome, Nina.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, Madam President and Commissioners. My name is Nina Pinar, and I live at 1516 North 21st Street, Boise, 83702. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all the work you put into this. As the Advocacy Director of the Boise Bicycle Project, I've had the privilege of working closely with our community to promote safer and more accessible cycling options. And I believe that the proposed pathway policy represents a significant step in the right direction to making walking and biking a safer option in Boise. This past weekend, BVP was at the Welcoming Week Family Field Day, where we partnered with a number of organizations to welcome new arrivals to Boise. But most importantly, we hosted a bicycle safety class where, excuse me, this event offered essential bike safety training and road rules education for nearly 100 kids and families. What made it even more exceptional was the involvement of BVP's Shifting Gears program, where members from the South Boise Women's Correctional Center, along with volunteers, helped us put on a traffic garden. This event brought together so many incredible people from different backgrounds, and whether they were new to Boise or Boise natives, they all bonded over the same thing: watching kids enjoy riding and learning safety skills. These kids are ready to rip and to hit the streets and to explore their new home. And the Pathways policy can ensure that all new developments are built and designed with a wide multi-use pathway. President Pickering, you said something earlier this year that's really stuck with me. We need to build infrastructure that will last. And we need to build it right the first time. And I believe that implementing policies like this will help us actually achieve that goal. So in conclusion, I am in support of the new proposed Pathways policy. And I'm really excited to see Boise become a safe city for all road users. Thank you so much for everyone and all the time you've put into this.
Thanks, Nina.
Next, we have Marissa Keep.
Welcome, Marissa.
My name's Marissa Keith at 3279 South Cloverdale Road in Boise. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, you're great.
Okay, I can barely hear you guys, so I'm not sure if I was on or not. I just wanted to thank you for implementing this policy. It means a lot for me living out in Southwest Boise, where we have zero bike ped infrastructure. And I'm really excited to see what this brings in the future for our area. Just a couple of things that to keep in mind is that we all know that a network is only as good as its weakest link. So I think, making sure the policy is very clear about anytime a pathway comes closer than 8 feet, if that 8-foot buffer is less than 8 feet, that there is some sort of element there to keep not only cars from drifting up on the sidewalk, but to keep people from drifting onto the street. And I always tell the story about riding to the snow cone shack with my 6-year-old who was a little bit wobbly on the bike. And yeah, there was like a 3-foot buffer on Overland of this red painted brick, but my level of stress was through the roof because he was just like all over the place. And it would have not taken much for him to go into traffic. So we never rode to the snow cone shack again. The other issue that I'd just like to talk about is, I do live in what was a rural area, and part of the reason that we are in this mess is because things were not planned for. Part of that is because of the different jurisdictions out here, but please don't be too lax on just because it's going through an industrial area or a rural area. That could change in 5 years and be a completely different neighborhood at that point. And then it's so very, very difficult to get things put in place after the fact. So I would rather see a lot more, overdoing the infrastructure and then underdoing it and then wishing that that it had been done in the first place. So I know that, so ACHD just released the Cloverdale preliminary plan last week, and I'm hoping that some of this will apply to that. It won't come before the commission probably for months and months yet, but I would encourage the highway district to apply as much of this to unconstructed roads as possible, even if they have to go back and tweak the design a little bit. And then I am excited. I would love to see the next policy be about standardizing the speed limits, because that has been, as I said, that's been one of my tasks this summer from our neighborhood association community. And it would be really helpful if the highway district would just take that on for me. So thank you.
Thanks, Marissa.
And then we do have a statement from Becky Dodge. She writes, Becky Dodge here at 5750 Hallmark Court in Boise, 83703. I don't need to speak necessarily, but would like to add my support for this ordinance. Today is the 13th anniversary of my husband being hit by a car while biking to work at Compass in Meridian. This crash occurred at Leather Way and McMillan at 7:15 a.m. on September 27th, 2010. He sustained a C1, C4, and C5 spinal cord injury and died as a result of his injuries on December 12th of 2021. I am in favor and highly supportive of any changes for cyclists and pedestrians, particularly the lowering of automobile speeds and the buffers between users that are in this ordinance. And lastly, I would like to thank for the opportunity, Becky Dodge.
You see, it looks like someone's trying to jump in. Is there anyone else online that would like to testify on this issue? Okay. Thank you. Oh.
If I may, I was typing out a question. This is Brian Passmore from Central Rim neighborhood, 4503 West Irving Street, Boise, Idaho.
Welcome, Brian.
06. Thanks. I really appreciate all the clarifying questions that you've asked tonight. They've been immensely helpful in digesting, understanding this policy. So thank you for asking those questions. I pulled up the street map, noticed that the street that I live on happens to be categorized as a collector street, and unfortunately haven't had enough time to give this a quick read. So I wanted to ask how this policy would impact homeowners pursuing, I don't know, renovations, remodeling, etc. along collector streets, if at all.
Thanks, Brian. Ryan, do you mind answering that?
Madam President, Commission, I'm loud. In most cases, a renovation or a remodel does not trigger modifications. It's typically at the plat level or the subdivision level where it triggers review by ACHD and requirements by ACHD. The city may have certain requirements as it relates to sidewalks through minor subdivisions and other types of things like that, but it typically wouldn't apply in that case.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Brian, did you have any other questions?
I do not. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else online that would like to testify?
As I discussed with, as I mentioned earlier in our discussion with staff, is that if the policy, I want to stress that the policy is put forward as having flexibility to it, because it shouldn't be viewed as a one-size-fits-all. And there are places where it doesn't make sense to implement the full pathway construction all at once. And I think, fortunately, that the policy as it's drafted will allow us to be, rational in that respect, and recognize that not all locations require the same treatment. And for that reason, I'm in favor of adopting the policy, and I think it'll be very helpful going forward in all of the development that happens in the county.
Commissioner Hanson.
So I would echo that. I think it's important, as some people have mentioned, that we have a consistent vision of how we're going to connect everybody. A number of years ago, there was quite a concern about why are we asking developers to put in these unattached concrete sidewalks in developments out in rural areas, and we don't know how they're going to be used, and they weren't wide enough for a multi-use path. That's part of what triggered the movement towards let's envision what it's going to look like. And so I think there's much more support out there, especially in areas that are not developed, like south of the freeway. It's like so much easier to put in a multi-use path with a nice wide buffer. As development occurs, it's there to be used, and we don't try and build it or bootstrap it in. Obviously, as I indicated in my comments, is how do we figure out those older arterials that are going to experience redevelopment, and it might take a URD in order to do those sort of systematic improvements. And I really appreciate we're moving forward on this whole notion of one and done. Let's envision what it looks like. Let's do it once right. Yeah, it probably will need to make some changes, especially with crossings as development occurs. But we should do this right. I appreciate Brian specifying interpretation, which is now on the record, so it's legislative history as to how these policies are being applied. The other, of course, is that we keep getting awards for being a bikeable, walkable community, and developers are promoting themselves as, yes, you buy a home in my area, you work in my area, you can safely walk and bike there. So they're actually wanting to do these. They just want some consistency to know how they're going to connect. And I think you're going to see this more and more and more as they're saying, yeah, this is a marketing value to what we're trying to sell and develop in Ada County. I appreciate the comments made by I didn't write down her name, but about the whole notion of drainage and so forth. And so, but I think that's really important as we're seeing this development into existing areas. We can create creative ways. Yeah, it's typically the old areas like in Overland and the Bench where we have issues of drainage, way too much concrete covering up what ought to be permeable pavers. And I point to Cassia Street as an example of how we were able to do that, not in the bike facilities, but in the parking facilities. So there's all kinds of interesting ways in which we can do that. This is a huge step forward, and I just huge kudos to staff for taking it on, figuring out how to do this. And of course, it helps that we also now, everybody understands we're following ProWAG. So thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner Hanson. Commissioner Gold?
Yeah, thanks, Madam President. I just want to say thanks to Brian and staff. I think you all did a really great job over time getting feedback and incorporating it into the policy. The policy has changed a lot to reflect that feedback, so I really appreciate that. And I also think through this process, we've been able to identify other areas that can get our attention and improvement through policy. So thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to, I feel like it's worth just echoing. Thank you to our staff for leading this effort, for providing your expertise and incorporating the really great feedback from our partner agencies in such an open and collaborative way. And I want to say thank you to my fellow commissioners and all of the folks that weighed in on those advisory committees, because like Commissioner Goldthorpe said, you know, our rural and suburban communities deserve safety just as much as our urban ones do. And we really need to make sure that there's consistency across our entire network. And regardless of where you live, you should be able to travel safely, regardless of mode. And so I think this is a massive step in the right direction, and just truly thankful for where we are today with it. So with that, commissioners, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Congrats, Ryan. All right, do we need like a 10-minute break before we jump into the other one? Is that all right? Okay, so we'll resume at 7 on our second item.
Recess, you gotta run out to, you know, at recess, right? Everybody runs out as fast as they can for recess.
Oh, it's okay. Are we back on? Are we on? Thank you. All right. Thank you for being patient with us. It's now 7:01. We're going to go ahead and resume the meeting. All right, we're going to move on to item number 2, which is 2024-2028 Integrated 5-Year Work Plan. This is plan adoption. And it is a request for approval. It's a public hearing as well, right, Steve? So we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Madam President, Commissioners. There we go. Good evening, Madam President and Commissioners. For the record, Rebecca Phillips, Transportation Planner with the ACHD Planning and Programming Division. I come before you today with the adoption of the 24-28 Integrated 5-Year Work Plan. Commissioners, again, here is a reminder of the major milestones we've completed over this past year as we've developed the 24-28 Integrated 5-Year Work Plan. We were last here on September 6th presenting the public partner agency comments, and all of those proposed edits have now been incorporated into the plan. We released the final draft on September 13th. And I will also highlight the 24-28 Integrated 5-Year Plan contains 604 total projects and programs totaling $1.1 billion. On this slide, you will see a snapshot of the public and partner outreach that started last November, where we held a kickoff meeting with our partner agencies. Those agencies consisted of all 6 cities, Ada County, all 3 school districts, Boise State University, and Valley Regional Transit. We then opened the public partner agency comment period consecutively, with public comments ending January 8th, totaling 1,350 total comments, and partner agency prioritization lists due February 15th, where we received 450 individual project requests. We held a public open house for the 24-28 initial draft on July 27th, and then moved into another public and partner agency comment period thereafter, receiving 4 partner agency requests or partner agency responses, and 111 public comments. In addition to the public and partner agency outreach, I did want to highlight the commission engagement that led up to our adoption today. Over the past year, we have been before you a total of 9 times between work sessions, workshops, or individual meetings. And finally, Madam President, Commissioners, staff recommends approval of Resolution 2411 and adoption of the 24-28 Integrated 5-Year Work Plan as presented. And I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, so thanks. I wondered if I would like to see a few things put onto the 5-year work plan that, and adjust a few things. And the way I've looked at it, it is not going to affect the budget. But because a number of them are for future, and I think it's real important because a number of the neighborhoods that I work with said, where is this? Or, wow, do you have to do this so far out? Or how come that's a priority instead of this one, when in fact the neighborhood, it's the other way around? And I said, well, this is the time when we can make those adjustments. And so if this is a good time, I just want to walk through the couple things that each part of the neighborhood raised. If that'd be okay?
Madam President, members of the Commission, this is Justin Lucas, Deputy Director of Planning and Projects. Certainly, the Commission has every opportunity and option to provide further feedback tonight. Some of the things, if things come up that are changing program years and things like that, staff may not be able to respond live. We may need more time to provide relevant feedback and analysis. So glad to provide as much information as we can tonight. But as it relates to changing certain elements of the plan at this point in the process, staff would need just time to, it's kind of domino effect. When we start moving one thing, other things move. And so we just have to be able to provide that a whole picture to the Commission. At least that would be our preference.
thanks, and that's why I think it's important, and I'll just keep raising this. I raised this with the requests I made in the spring. I raised this in some of our discussions during the summer. And there's a few of these that I'm not sure why they didn't get incorporated, so that's why. If I just walk through them quickly, Barber Valley, we adopted the neighborhood plan. They came to me and they said that there's nothing on our plan that's even in the 5-year work plan. And their top priorities, I just combined them, top 2 priorities deal with Warm Springs. And I did ask that we would scope it after we finished scoping the portion of Warm Springs. And I got an indication of, yeah, we can do that, but I didn't see that in here, that we would scope it after we finished scoping from Avenue C to Windsong. We'll scope from Windsong to Highway 21. Huge priority for the neighborhood. Obviously, we already designated most of that as a collector, and we've done 2 crossings there, but it's still, still looks like a state highway. And the other is the portion on Park Center from the bridge to the roundabout, where they have a lot of speeding, and but there were 2 things, bikes and pedestrian, so just combine them one. I don't say what year, but in the future, so that we can indicate to this neighborhood, if we adopted your plan, we do envision in the future dealing with this. We did some great work on Burgesson, restriping it. I don't think it doesn't seem to me a huge design issue to incorporate some of those things with temporary or permanent. And so if we started the design process sooner than just off into the future, and so I'm suggesting 25, and I also asked that law be incorporated in that, because that's the East Amity, which very much related to the policy we just adopted. That part of the neighborhood has been asking for East Amity to be dealt with, a multi-use path along the side. There's a new park going in. There's a lot of neighborhoods. We're going to do something at Holcomb, and yet it's not, East Amity's not on the plan at all. So it's like, well, where is East Amity? Because that development is occurring, and we can, again, put it into the future. The same thing into the future is on the neighborhoods over on East Columbia and Technology Way, and we already know there's going to be a huge amount of new development and changes happening at the Micron site. So knowing that, yes, we are going to program and try and program into the future consistent with what Micron's going to do, so that it doesn't, it's dangerous right now. The neighborhood's been asking for improvements or protection on that collector road. I don't know why we wouldn't reference a program we're already working on with ITD to the Federal Way connection from Federal Way down to Broadway. I think that's largely an ITD issue because it's Broadway, but it's us too because it's Federal Way. So it's us, and so it's like, it seems to me we ought to reference it, and I don't know what the dates would be on that. And then the last one's kind of one we already made a commitment to the Ada County Commission. This is for Southeast, and that's the Eckerd Bridge. And talking to staff, it sounds like we're moving forward on a scoping, but there's no reference to that scoping in the 5-year plan. And that's a huge scoping project because it's like over a canal, over the bridge. We got federal waterways issues, we got complexities, but we have potentially opportunities for grants. But it seems to me it ought to be referenced in the 5-year plan. Otherwise, we really owe it to the county commissioners to explain why we don't have a reference to it. The Boise East End, there's just a couple more. Hang on, just a couple more. Boise East End appreciates the Warm Spring Avenue, and would ask that the Warm Springs Avenue scoping, and would ask that there not be a big gap between this end of the scoping period and the moving into design. Mostly because, again, Warm Springs is state highway, turned over to the local agency 30 years ago, and we still haven't dealt with what was the expectation. We turned it into a local collector road. And so they just asked that it be closer in time between the scoping ending and the beginning of a design phase. And they would ask that a project we're going to talk about tomorrow morning, the McKinley, Jefferson, Franklin, be added as a future project too, because that's another priority for the neighborhood. Didn't show up as a future. And with that, we wouldn't need to reference Costin as sort of moving forward on its own. Costin will move forward after we do the Warm Springs, so I think that is important. The reference to the neighborhood asking for, it might not even be a 5-year plan. It might be something we could do with rapid implementation is the Shaw Mountain Shenandoah Table Rock. Again, they've been asking for that because there's a lot of traffic that comes down that road very fast. And we haven't done anything to address that except put up a stop sign a couple of years back. The Boise Central Bench priority, especially the Vista neighborhood, is Nez Perce. And so I had asked earlier, please make that a priority over the use, the redo of that one corner at Vista and Overland. They're about the same cost, and so I'd ask that we flip those around. Because we can address the safety issues on that free running right turn with temporary rapid implementation. We could put speed humps, we can narrow the turning radius. There's a number of things we could do without the huge cost price tag that we've attached to that. And I do not support moving forward on that before we move forward on Nez Perce. And so I'd ask from the neighborhood standpoint to flip those around. Move forward on, we've already approved a concept for Nez Perce. If we can actually put those resources into the Nez Perce, that's a much higher priority. That's another example where Nez Perce was built, 50, 60, 70 years ago. And now we're finally looking at how it functions for a neighborhood. And I really like the scope that we have, but the frustration in the neighborhood obviously is, wow, we've scoped it. Now it's way, way out here before we'll actually design it and construct it. So it has to flip those around. I also asked to move up the design on Latah Street. I'm suggesting moving up the construction year on Desert as well. Again, these are not in this year's budget or this coming year's budget. And we talked about a bridge over the canal. Neighborhoods would like to have that pedestrian bridge over the New York Canal. Again, maybe that's a rapid implementation. We've discussed it, I know, but it'd be great to either see it on there or say, yeah, we're gonna look at that as a rapid implementation. My last one is something the commission may not agree to, but I don't think we should move on the right-of-way and construction years designated for the Maple Grove projects until after we've determined the Orchard Street extension and a resolution of the issues at Molinar Park. So those are some things. Out of 604 projects in there, those are fairly small, but they're important for those particular neighborhoods. And I would ask we just incorporate these into the adoption of the 5-year plan.
Madam President, Commissioner Hansen, thank you so much for your feedback. With that, I will see if Ms. Christy Inselman or, okay.
Once again, Madam President, members of the commission, we appreciate all feedback from the commission. We're here to take your direction. Excuse me. As I say, I don't know if we can respond really adequately to all of those requests tonight. There was at least what I heard, or I think I heard, was some movement of money in years, and there are implications to that within the plan as we try to balance the document. What we have brought you tonight, we believe, is staff's best effort to try and respond to the various inputs we've received over the last many months. We've tried to hit the mark, and sometimes we're bringing to you what we have. And once again, we're here to take your direction.
Thanks, Justin. All right, I want to get back to, so any other questions for staff? I do, and unfortunately Tom Furch isn't here, but maybe Justin, you could answer this. So, quite a few of the projects that are in my district qualified for that Access to Opportunity grant. And, very excited to see the design year for 2024, 2026. But of course, right of way and all of those things are future because we need to reapply for those funds or what have you, right? So do you recollect the timeline of when we would be able to apply for those funds once that design is complete, and when we would be able to start putting some dates, assuming we get the funding, when we would be able to put some dates into a future integrated 5-year work plan?
Madam President, members of the commission, it's a really good question and something that staff is working through right now. As you are aware, the infrastructure bill was brand new. We jumped right in and got that planning grant for the design and the environmental. The right-of-way and the construction remains unfunded, as you can see in the plan. We believe that once we get these agreements in place, we have the design consultant under contract, which is what we're doing right now. And you're going to see, I believe it's next week, or maybe it was this week on your consent agenda. You just approved.
Yeah, it was
it this week? Yeah, there you go.
It was just this week.
It was just this week. You've approved the state and local agreement, which is the next step in that process to get us going. Once we get into the designs, and we get to that like 30% phase and we start to nail down cost estimates, which really is the key for us to then go out and apply for more money. I think we're going to have a better picture of that. Fortunately, we update the integrated 5-year work plan every single year. It gives us an opportunity on an annual basis to potentially, as we have more information, move projects out of future. Some of them can accelerate rapidly. Sometimes they can't, depending on the situation. I think it's going to be interesting as we see how much federal funds are available for the implementation, what we do there, or if there's a decision by the commission to potentially use some local funds to supplement those projects to keep them moving forward. Those would all be topics that we would need to explore with the commission before I could give you an exact timeline.
Sure. I mean, but do you know generally when, I don't want to assume, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that ideally when we have a sense of those costs and a good design for some or all of these projects, will hopefully that align when there's the window to apply for those funds?
Absolutely. That was a multi-year, Madam President, Commissioners, it's a multi-year funding bill. So every year there's going to be opportunities to seek additional funding. As we get into that design phase and we get our foot in the door, what we do know is that projects that are selected for the planning phase have kind of a step up when you go for additional phases, because once you're in the system, they look at those projects, they've already reviewed them, they've already taken action and provided us funding, and so we're confident that we will be able to get, now I can't say all the funding, but we will be able to fund portions of those projects going forward. Timeline-wise, 24, 25, we're doing design. Let's say we get into that right-of-way phase and, 26, 27, we're looking at construction in some of those out years of the plan. We didn't feel comfortable putting them in construction this year just because of the unknowns.
Well, and that totally makes sense, but it's just sometimes when I'm talking to neighborhoods and they see the range of it's 24 to 26, and then not knowing when we can or may not be able to apply for those funds, it's a big window. And so it's like, okay, when will we be getting that design complete so that we can articulate and know for certain, if we get the funds, that we can go to right-of-way and construction. So
and Madam President, and this just as I've been thinking and in a response to Commissioner Hanson, I think there's a difference between adding a project in and naming it in the plan and maybe listing it as future. I think without allocating funds at this time, I think those kinds of changes, staff can really lean in on that and we can make those type of edits. When we get into moving funds, that becomes more challenging just because of the nature of the plan. And so I just want to offer that as some input as you consider your deliberations tonight. And I don't know if that helps or not, but that would be something to consider as you consider your deliberations.
No, thank you, Justin. Other questions?
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney.
Yes, and Justin, this is kind of for you. So kind of coming back to the list of comments and requests that Commissioner Hanson presented, as I counted up, there's like 19 individual requests for adjustment. Those are very, very detailed with respect to the plan. I'm not sure. First of all, I look at this as a comment. I think it would be very difficult for us as a commission to consider all 19 of these right now and add that into our decision here, because we haven't had time to really think about or consider them. But when it comes to making changes to the plan, let's presume that tonight we approve this 5-year work plan as it is presented. These requests for changes that Commissioner Hanson has presented, and other requests that any of us may have or that may come from any source, going forward, those changes can certainly be considered and adjustments made going forward, can they not? What's the standard procedure for making sure that happens?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, you know, what we present in a situation like this is kind of a snapshot in time. And the 5-year work plan, this document, it's not a budgetary document. It is really a plan. It's
Right.
a guide. And so that's why we update it on an annual basis. The first 2 years of the plan are intended to mirror ACHD's budget, which is adopted by the commission. And those first 2 years, you know, really lock in funding in a lot of ways. The outer years and some of the, you know, there's always tweaks and changes. And I think as the commission considers its budget in the upcoming year, as the commission considers budget adjustments, all of those things, potentially new information, there's things that happen within the network that require rapid response. There's always changes in the ability to make edits based on the best information we have. And so I don't want to say that the plan doesn't mean anything. That's not true at all. It certainly is a guide for us, and it really gives us that vision of what we're trying to accomplish. But through the annual discussions we have with the commission, through the budget and the integrated 5-year work plan process, there are ample times where we're able to make changes. For example, we constructed an entire overpass at Cloverdale Road. That project never actually showed up in the integrated 5-year work plan because it was an emergency. We ended up designing and constructing that project within, I think, a record time. I think it was 13 months, sir. And that's the kind of thing that happens where we had to respond. That project never really showed up in the normal way. And so there's a lot of flexibility built into the system.
Well, and I appreciate that. And that brings me to a couple items that I'd like to add to this discussion. Stacy, if you have those images, there are a couple of images, and the question in my mind, what I have to talk about relates to both the 5-year work plan and the budget. And I'm not 100% certain that this is the right place or the right time to address this, but I think it needs to be addressed, and I've alluded to it in the past. That cover image that you see of the 5-year work plan, you know, it shows one car, one bus, 2 bicycles, 2 pedestrians, well, 3 pedestrians, 1 being handicapped. Okay. And that's great, and that looks great. It's kind of an idealized city block, and it's a great illustration. But the reality is that on our streets in this county, that's not anything close to the relative proportions that we have. There are a few buses, thousands upon thousands of cars for every bicycle, and in most parts of the county for every pedestrian as well. And the big challenge that I see is that in our budget and in our 5-year work plan, we've got a tremendous excess contribution, or not contribution, but we're putting resources toward community programs far beyond the level at which makes sense. If we look at this chart, for example, this is our capital budget. Well, let's see, this is all years. So this is going through 24 to 28. And if we look at this, the community programs is 22% of this. But notice this budget also includes the capital, the 46% there, capital improvement, 24% is capital maintenance. And of course, if we're just looking at how much of the money that we're using to build new stuff is going to these community programs, well, maintenance doesn't fall in that category. Traffic safety and ops doesn't really qualify either, and the bridge program does.
Commissioner McKinney, I hate to interrupt you, but I'm trying to understand what's your question for staff as it relates to integrated 5-year work plan in this table, in this diagram?
Well, the question is, when do we decide to kind of bring our budget, to bring our allocation of resources into line with the reality that in most of this county, most of the demand on our infrastructure is vehicles, cars and trucks. And yet we're spending, if you take the maintenance out of here, because that's not about building new stuff, we're spending more than 25%, something like 30 or more percent of our capital improvement budget is going to projects that don't benefit the vast majority of users. We're taking millions of dollars of resources and putting them into programs that, gosh, they make us feel good because we're improving pedestrian safety and bicycle safety, but the reality is it's an over allocation. We're putting way too much in that direction. And, you know, the reality is, as far as prioritizing the different projects within their categories, I don't have any problems with the 5-year work plan that we have here. But when it comes to the fact that we're spending 25, 30 or more percent of our capital improvement funds on bicycle and pedestrian projects, it should be more like 10%. That makes sense. That's appropriate. We've gotten so lopsided, and the problem is that these bicycle and pedestrian projects kind of tug at the heartstrings because we say it's safety, safety, safety. But the reality is that safety is a bottomless pit. That is to say, we could spend all of our money on safety and nothing else, and we would still never meet all the needs of that.
I feel
What
like
I'm
this
saying
is
here
a
is-
conversation for a budget hearing, not for the integrated 5-year work plan, Commissioner.
Well, it's
So
both.
I really want you to be more specific about what questions you have for staff as it relates to this plan.
Okay.
So if you have anything
Here's my
else
question.
on this train of thought,
Yes.
let's close it. Let's switch gears to the plan.
Oh no, this train of thought
Okay.
deserves more attention. Here's my
If
request.
it's on topic.
Here's my request. Cut at least half of the community programs and push all of that funding over and move up all of the possible projects that are in our, in that 46% capital improvement program, the bridge program, because that's where that money belongs. Could we do that? Because not only would we move these additional funds here, but these would be funds that, you know, in those community programs funds, they don't qualify for impact fees. Now, if we move these other projects over, now we have more projects that qualify for impact fees, and we can get a lot more done with what we've
Let's
got.
let staff answer your question. Justin.
Madam President, members of the commission, Commissioner McKinney, the resource allocation by category and program certainly is at the commission's direction.
Thank you.
Madam
Okay,
President?
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yes, I can answer Commissioner McKinney's questions with one simple statement. You get 3 votes, you can change anything. If you don't get the 3 votes, the community is better off. That's all I'll say about that. The one thing I was concerned about, and you've heard me say this 100 times, has been that we don't address enough safety for children, mostly pedestrians generally, in the sidewalk gap project. But while Jim was gone, Ryan had saved me from a heart attack. And we will be addressing the sidewalk gap program projects with our chip seal going forward. And I don't know if you knew that, Jim. It's going to make a huge difference in how we program those things in, and probably a much accelerated difference rather than hearing me nag about $2 or $3 million every now and then. So I'm very grateful for that. But I will say that one thing that I'm kind of sick of is watching the Maple Grove project get kicked down the road time-wise. You know, we had COVID, we had Cloverdale Road, we had all kinds of things that have caused that project to get stretched out. And I really don't want to see that happen again, especially since the city of Boise had pulled their support and their priority for the Orchard extension. We have to do that Maple Grove project according to the current timetable, or we're going to have major problems with the southwest part of the county.
Commissioner Goldthorpe, if you don't mind me asking a follow-up question to staff. So what year is the Maple Grove, what is the timetable for that project?
It's in Boise Southwest.
Sorry, Madam President, Commissioners, for the record, Christy Anselman, Planning Supervisor here at Ada County.
25, 26.
So we have the 1 mile segment of Maple Grove scheduled for construction. in 2028.
And which section is that?
And then the second section, past that, we don't have, but we do have design and right of way in the plan to move that project forward. We also have to be a little bit sensitive to the Southwest Boise area because we have a lot going on in that area and we can't shut the entire system down. We also have Lake Hazel, several segments of Lake Hazel in 24, Eagle Road that's going to construction. So we have a lot of, and Amity, there's a segment of Amity too also going in 24. We do have it in there. So.
I know, that's why I said, don't put any more brakes on it.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Gold, did you have any other questions? Did you have questions for staff at all?
Thanks, Madam President. No, I don't really have additional questions. I have talked to staff recently. There were 2 minor changes that I had requested that I've been assured can be made, that 15th and 16th from Americana and Emerald to State, to extend that to Fort, and then to add 32nd from State to Hill as a future project that's being scoped. So
thank you for working with staff to make that happen. Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up on Commissioner McKinney's, because it's something I agree with him, that the way in which we use project type does create an impression. And actually it's a false impression. And so I would ask that we move away from this false impression that community programs don't improve driving and don't improve facilities for people who are using a car. Well, that's false. Or that environmental drainage doesn't improve facilities for people who drive. Nothing worse than having a flooded road because we haven't addressed the drainage facilities. Traffic ops, maintenance. So it really has to do with size and then source of money. And I think this is the year we should just move away from these impressions, which I believe are false, about where our resources are. Because ultimately everybody's a taxpayer in the county and they're entitled to have their taxpayers' dollars spent both close to home and in the larger system. And as you see, the big bucks go largely to expanding roads and intersections and roundabouts. And while there are a lot of small projects that may take a road that doesn't function, either for drivers, cyclists, walking, and making improvements on it, is smaller, it's still very, very important, because that's the one that's most important. It also, there's a huge component, we don't measure it, but there's a huge component to investment in resiliency for these neighborhoods. And if we have ignored it, we haven't. I would just ask, of the projects that I've suggested, I did have raised these in the past, and there's a couple of things. I'm a little frustrated. I think Christie's done a fabulous job, but I have asked on a number of occasions not to prioritize the Overland Vista intersection above Nez Perce, because that's not the neighborhood priority. The neighborhood priority is Nez Perce. They actually never asked for that intersection to be done, and we can do it with a rapid implementation until it gets redeveloped. Their priority is Nez Perce, and that neighborhood's largely been ignored since I started here. And so I'm thrilled that we're there, but then of course, and I'm leaving, no one should hold these positions of power for more than 12 years. I'm leaving, which is a good thing. And we'll have new voices and new perspectives. But after 12 years, I would like to see at least some movement on the one project, perhaps, that I brought in the very first, and that a project that I never asked for, neither did the neighborhood, which costs about the same, would move ahead of that. And so that's why I'm saying that's the only, to me, that's the only budget issue. The other is the outlying years, put them on there so the neighbors know at least we were paying attention to them. We'll put them in future years.
Madam President, members of the commission, certainly currently the construction year for Nez Perce is in 2028. The Overland Road project, and I understand Commissioner Hanson, at least I believe I do, about the free running right and the analysis we did there. That project is we rolled that project into the federal aid project, which is the reconstruction and reconfiguration of Overland Road. So the timing on that specific project, Overland Road, is somewhat set by the federal aid process, which is how it's laid out in the plan. And the Nez Perce project is not a federal aid project; it's a local project. So, just technically, those projects from a funding perspective are not linked in that way. Certainly, at the commission's discretion, if there's a desire to move faster on a certain project, we have construction in 2028. Here we are entering 2024. If there's a desire at the commission level to try and move faster on that, and you want to provide us with that direction tonight, we're glad to take that direction.
So, Madam President, I would ask for that, and then I would like y'all to get back to me. None of these are new. We've talked about all of these in the past, and so that's why I thought maybe after asking a couple times they would appear. But on that one in particular, and I would suggest that federal aid could be used better elsewhere, because now that we have a RAPL implementation project, I just have heartburn, and I said this when we move forward with that concept on Vista and Overland, is that I just have a lot of heartburn spending, whether it's federal money or local money, on something that's going to be ripped out when that corner gets redeveloped. The other three corners are commercial development. That corner is the only one that's residential right now. So it's inconsistent with the current. And I believe in the future, some developer is going to come in and change that and make it more consistent with the others. But we don't know when that's going to take place. I just hate spending all that money to rebuild part of an intersection only to have it ripped out and done later. In the meantime, we can make that safe and put that money somewhere else. So that's what I'd like to see happen. And I'd like to see Nez Perce moved up.
Okay. All right. So, Stacy, do we have anyone that's signed up to testify?
Marissa on Zoom would like to testify.
Okay. And before we turn it over to you, Marissa, I do want to make a mention that Tessa with the city had testified on this issue at one point earlier on our first item. So, Stacy, do you mind making a note of that?
Sure.
Thank you for that. Okay, Marissa, it's the floor is yours. 3 minutes, please. Oh. You're a little.
Yeah, I would say for the most part, I think me and most of my neighbors are a little bit confused as to why the orchard realignment is not happening. We haven't really got an adequate explanation about that, whether we've asked the city or other people. But I know that, we still have Syringa that's not built out. Murillo Farms, although it was pulled off the agenda at Boise a couple weeks ago, we're expecting that to come forward at some point. There's going to be, probably 10,000 more people out here in the next, decade. And so that realignment project will be an important thing for Southwest Boise. So I just wanted to say, I ride my bike occasionally. I drive most of the time just because where I live, but my youngest son goes to West Junior High, and there's like 900 kids there. And partly because the infrastructure is so bad here, last year I testified at the State House in front of the legislature, and before that I stood there and I counted cars that came in to West Junior High, and out of 900 students there was probably at least 300 cars, parents dropping off their kids to school, single, one child per car. And they're doing that because there is no safe way really to walk to that school. Some of the roads have sidewalks. It's a busy road. You have to cross Maple Grove. And so survey after survey, no matter if the highway district does it, the city of Boise, whoever it is, people want wider roads, but they also want bike and pedestrian safety. And it's not only so their kids can get to school, it's so that they are not, running into kids that are trying to cross Overland Road. Like 2 weeks ago, 7 teenage boys crossing in the middle of Overland Road because there is no pedestrian crossing unless they go, a mile down to the major arterials. Pedestrian safety also helps motorists. And for Maple Grove, I would like to see that one done too. We're still hopefully working through some things with the highway district. I owe you a response to an email that was sent in. But like I said, I drive most of the time, and if it takes me 5 minutes longer to get home because we put in a pedestrian crossing and we don't have the funds to widen Cloverdale right away, I'm fine with that. And I'll tell you why. It's because of Jaden, and it's because of Terry Binder, and it's because of Ryland Hoop, and it's because of Edward, 7 years old, who died on Amity Road in a sidewalk gap that is still not filled. Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa. Stacy, is there anyone else?
There's no one else.
For anyone else online, this is your time to say that you want to testify. Okay. All right. Commissioners.
Madam President,
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you. Commissioner Goldthorpe.
yes, I would make a motion that we approve the 2024-2028 integrated 5-year work plan.
Second.
Madam President?
Moved and seconded. Commissioner McKinney.
Yeah, let me, I want to add some additional thoughts. Earlier, we were questioning the staff. I have some comments that I think are important. Commissioner Hanson talked about false impressions. We spent significant resources in the last couple of years doing some surveys. The BSU did some surveys of what the people of this county want, what they think are the most significant needs as far as transportation are concerned. And it's true, they mentioned bicycle and pedestrian safety, but that was way down the list, like in 9th place compared to widening roads, reducing congestion, and so on. So to say that the people want these bicycle and pedestrian facilities, what we have is a very active and very strong and vocal activist group that's pushing for these things and constantly pushing us. But the push of that strength is not coming from the public at large. The public at large, I think, the survey results show they want a very balanced approach, and they recognize that throughout most of this county, what people need is the ability to move around in their cars and to move trucks. And the truth is the economy of the county depends upon the ability of people to get where they need to go for goods and people to get from place to place. And for the most part, that's not, it's not bicycle and pedestrian facilities that do that primarily. Now, there are parts of the county where that's a big factor, downtown Boise and so on. But for the most part, it's suburban neighborhoods and strip malls. People are car dependent. And whether you like that or not, that's the reality that we live in, and we've got to recognize that. It is a false impression to believe that building these sorts of facilities, the bicycle and pedestrian facilities, as nice as they are, it's a false impression to believe that that's going to have a significant effect on traffic congestion. It simply doesn't. Its effect is very small. In a place like this, the question was brought up about the Orchard realignment. There are a variety of issues there I'm aware of. But in all of these new road projects, money is the big issue, or is, at the top of the list of the issues that are involved. We owe the people of this county, our job is to appropriately reflect what they want. And then, as a whole, they're not demanding more and more and more of these community programs. They're demanding, hey, widen these roads. We've got congestion that's giving us, failing traffic intersections and so on during the peak hour. My request is that in this 5-year work plan, that we take that community programs category and we take the budget that's allocated to that, chop it in half, and adjust everything else accordingly, so that for projects like the Orchard realignment, funds are available to do more of those. It's not to stop doing the others, but it's to do more of what the people are asking us to do. As terrible as it is to contemplate, these accidents that have caused injuries and deaths, those sorts of things will always happen. And it's our job not to make decisions based upon emotion, but to look at the facts, to look at the realities of this county, the realities of what people need and of what the public wants, and to make decisions accordingly in ways that are responsible. And pushing 30% or more of our capital improvement budget into community programs simply is not responsible. And that's a reason why I have to step back and say, I can't just keep going in this direction. We've got to make changes that make sense. And we haven't made them yet. We're not even moving in that direction. We're still pushing more and more resources into categories that aren't the most important ones that we should be focusing on. And for that reason, I can't vote to approve the work plan as it's currently set out.
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say one thing, because I've heard enough over the last couple of years about that survey that that, in my opinion, is some of the worst money ACHD's ever spent. I've done surveys all my adult life. I've paid for surveys. I've developed survey questions. All the results of all of them depended on whether or not my family would eat. And so they had to be completely unbiased with no expectation of how the questions were structured to get a certain type of an answer. And I do not believe that was the case with the survey that we had a couple of years ago. And so, as I said at the very beginning, if we never do another one of those without doing it the same way we did about 6 years ago, that'd be too soon for me. Thank you.
All right, any other discussion?
Madam President?
Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah, I just correct Commissioner McKinney, said some of the projects that are not to widen roads, which you, I think, are mischaracterized as community. I said improve driving. I agree, none of these are going to cause congestion to be controlled. That's a result of development patterns that the cities have approved without connectivity. It's going to happen. Congestion's going to get worse. I don't care how many lanes you add or whether we condemn commercial property along Overland Road and build more lanes. You're still going to have congestion because of the development patterns. So you're still going to have congestion. That's why, I think our movement towards one and done is a good movement. Your suggestion is we should back away from that, spend our money only to address the pavement from curb to curb and not the crosswalks or anything else, and then go back maybe later on and go back into those same places and put in facilities that people are demanding. That's fiscally irresponsible. I think we should do one and done. We should do it right. Now, we should have done it right 50 years ago, 10 years ago, and going back and saying, this is how we should do it. I have concerns that I still don't have an answer on how these are going to be incorporated into the proposal. I would make a substitute motion that we move adoption of the 5-year integrated work plan for 2 weeks until the request that I and Commissioner Gold have made can be reflected in the actual plan we're voting on.
Is that your motion,
It
Commissioner?
is my motion.
Is there a second? Substitute motion fails for lack of a second. Commissioner Hanson, any other comments on this?
No, I just need some assurances.
Okay. Well, I think staff are going to time to look over your list.
Oh, I agree.
And if, swapping things out where there isn't an impact on the budget, I'm sure work to make those happen. But any other larger changes, come back to the commission. Okay, great.
As we should.
Yep. Okay. So, because we need more time too, just to make sure we all are on the same page.
Madam President, I would just say, if they were brand new, I would agree with you, but these are all
I understand
old.
that.
They've been brought up multiple times in the past.
I understand that. I just want to say thank you to our staff. Thank you for, despite what some commissioners might think, we had a very robust community engagement process that really drove what these projects are and reinforced what these projects should be in this plan, as well as our partner agencies, our advisory committees. So to accuse these projects as not being a reflection of what our communities want is woefully inaccurate. And I say this with great pride that I love this plan. Of course, there's some things that I wish I would love to move around myself, but I am excited to talk more about, okay, how can we continue to work through this and see where we can make those adjustments where we can. So with that, commissioners, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, moving on to public communications. Is there anyone that would like to address the commission at this time?
Mr. Clancy Anderson.
Welcome,
asked
welcome Clancy.
Hi there, commissioners. Clancy Anderson, 4611 North Shirley Avenue, Boise, Idaho, 83703. Commissioners, you have I missed a public discussion on the integrated 5-year work plan. You have my notes on that from earlier in the week. But listening to the discussion tonight, Commissioner McKinney should be ashamed. He said that safety is a bottomless pit. Anybody can go back and review that and watch it, which is great, because I don't think that reflects ACHD's values, their mission statement, and I don't think that's why his constituents elected him to be in the seat that he is. Safety should be everything that ACHD does and every decision that you make. And using his percentages, with over 50% of the deaths in Ada County this year in 2023 being bikes and pedestrians, mostly pedestrians, we should be allocating more to community programs. So thank you, commissioners, for doing what you do for community programs, and shame on you, Commissioner McKinney. Thank you.
Thanks, Clancy. Anyone else?
Madam President, may I respond?
No. All right.
Interesting.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you for the freedom of speech.